Hello, Miles. How are you?
Bravin, doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a minute since we've had a chat on the Tissue Connection. Lots of changes have happened. We should probably inform everyone that Josh is not part of the podcast anymore, unfortunately, just due to some what would you call it? He didn't want to hang out with us anymore, I guess. Not
Yeah,
like
he
prior
he thought he was
obligations or
too
anything.
cool for this school, I guess.
Yeah. But the Tissue Connection is still going to be going on with both Miles and myself. We're super excited. We're hoping to be a little more consistent. Did some extensive work on the back end. And by we I mean Miles did some extensive work on the back end, so we have a nice structure that we're looking to follow. And yeah, Miles, anything you wanna add before we introduce our guest for today?
No, I think as always, we're so excited to connect with industry professionals and, talk about common occurrences and less than common occurrences in our field. And so as you're going through this, if you have any topic ideas that come to mind, don't hesitate to reach out. But we're excited to introduce our next speaker and get on track with the podcast.
And without further ado, I am super excited to introduce Jeff Thomas. Jeff comes with 27, almost 28 years of tissue banking experience. His 28th tissue banking birthday is actually next month. Super close friend of mine. And when we were talking about this, when we were kind of game planning this topic, he was the first guy that came, or the first person that came to mind. So, Jeff, welcome to the Tissue Connection. We're happy to have you.
Thank you, Brevin. Thank you, Miles. I really appreciate being here.
Perfect. So, I guess we'll just kind of dive right in. So can you kind of tell us how you got into, or were kind of like exposed to tissue donation, kind of as a whole?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I've gotten it a lot over the years, as you can imagine, particularly being um, a minority in tissue banking 27 years ago. I got that question quite a bit, and I used to tell people, and I guess it's still applicable. I was either in the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the right time. Back then, I used to work for an orthopedic surgeon as a first assist, and I was standing outside of the emergency room one night, waiting. See, I said emergency room, not emergency department. So that long ago. So I was waiting on someone, something I can't remember, and a friend of mine walked by me, a guy named Jason Nash, and Jason was working for the Lion's Eye and Tissue Bank in Mississippi, and we got to talking outside of the ED. And long story short, I went over to their office the next week, and I left out of there with a part-time job recovering tissue. Had no idea what this was about or what it was, but it made a connection for me because working for the orthopedist that I worked for, we implanted tissue. And at that point in my career, I had no idea where tissue came from, and or what it really was, I guess. Kind of knew it came from a deceased person, but never really put two and two together until that time. So that's how I got into tissue banking. Now, it was an eye bank as well, so we did corneas all the time, but my first love was the tissue part of it because it gave me more of kind of a hands-on anatomy lesson slash it was, what I did in, orthopedic services anyway. So I knew all of the bones and the tendons, et cetera. So it was kind of a nice mesh for me.
I think it's really funny how a lot of people that are kind of like explaining like how they got into tissue banking, it's either I had plans of going to med school, or it kind of, like you said, kind of like right place at the right time or wrong place at the right time. And I can't tell you how many times, just like with talking with people, I've heard the tissue side gives you that extra anatomy, that extra hands-on, which I mean, that was kind of the same thing for me. And I know like offline, you and I've had hours of conversations and stuff like that. And I think that's definitely come up. So that's
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Well, med school wasn't off the table, Bravin. I even thought about going back to being an orthopedist because I really like building things, first of all. And I got into orthopedic services and it was exciting to me. But life happened. I got married, started having kids, and that plan just kind of went by. And I never thought I'd be a lifelong tissue banker. Back in 98, I didn't think in 2026 one, I'd be driving a car. I figured I'd be flying a car, but I didn't think I'd be in tissue banking.
We're lifers now, you know?
Well, once you're back 7 years, I think you are a lifer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that all the time. I mean, I started out as a teacher and here I am. I can't imagine going back, you know? We're
Yeah,
here now. They're stuck with us whether they like it or not.
there you go.
Could you talk us, I mean, through your experience and all of the jobs that you've had, can you walk us through the journey of a graft from authorization to implantation, just to set the scene of all the different perspectives, right? I think we run a relay race where I know my baton is passed from here to here, but I might not see the whole picture.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I'm familiar with. One, because I've done this for a long time, but two, back in 98, 99, 2000, we did everything. And
Right.
so you kind of saw that journey through from the beginning nearly to end, not quite to end because, we weren't a processor. But
Okay.
if I kind of think about where tissue begins, or where the graft begins, it really begins at the referral phase. Hospitals are required by law to make a phone call to the local OPO so you get the referral. And after that, you have to identify the right donor. So, doing kind of a criteria check of each of those referrals. And then once you identify a potential donor, then you have to go through with the authorization phase. Back in the day, we used to call it consent. Now
Yeah.
it's authorization, speaking with the next of kin, checking the donor registry, et cetera. Once you pass the authorization phase and you get said authorization, then you have to go through with the DRE. So we call it the medical social history interview. Um, that DRE process was, I think, 43 questions back in 1998, and now it seems like it's something like 120 questions when you add them all together. So it's evolved over time, and
For sure.
many of us are using what's known as the UDRE or the universal DRE, which is nice because you have that set of questions that almost never change, maybe some nuances. But so you go through the authorization, you go through with the DRE, and then once you set your team up, like Bravin and I used to do, we're setting the team up, we're ready to go out either to the OR or to our office based OR to do the recovery. Then you have the physical assessment. And so all of these things play a role in the donation process, but it plays a role in getting that graft from point A to point Z. So you go through the recovery process, and there's microbiology, screening, testing. And I think from there, it's really about determining eligibility after the recovery. So now we're looking at suitability on the front end, eligibility on the back end, and that eligibility process has a life of its own. And that's not something I'll go too much in detail, but it does have a life of its own because it involves other individuals. Everything here does the processing of the graft, the handling of the graft on the back end. I'd say even quality services, plays a role in what we do. So that graft travels from the referral process, the day of death, to the recovery through quality process to something I'd call storage and distribution. Sometimes it may not be stored. Sometimes it could be a graft that goes out as soon as processing is done. But most of the time it is stored for a short period of time, and those are the people I give a lot of props to. And then it goes to what I would call the end user, or my career, it was the orthopedist or the neurosurgeon or the oral surgeon, that is. It could go to a plethora of folks. So that lifespan travels in time, it travels in the number of hands that touch it and the number of hands that don't touch it. Because I think people probably don't think about the fact that, you got to have everybody involved in this gift. HR, IT, finance, and those are the people that you don't think about in this whole process.
It's funny because we talk about like support roles. And I say it's hard to say that there's a support role in this job because without any one piece of that puzzle being there, it all fails. It doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say you can't prioritize anybody over anybody else because it takes all of those different strengths coming together to make
Yeah,
the craft happen. It's
And
that's
it's
right.
cool.
Where I used to work here in Tampa, I would tell people, particularly accounting folks, I'm an accountant. I do this, I do that. Well, you're also part of the graph's journey. because without you, we couldn't make all of this happen. Without
Mhm.
HR, we couldn't make it all happen.
Yeah.
It's really funny looking every once in a while at Artivion. We'll bring in a recipient speaker and stuff like that, and we'll kind of put up on the screen behind them everyone from, like you said, when it gets to the processor to who packed it in the cooler and got it shipped out. There's like 25 people on that list, and it's so crazy to kind of think about, like you said, all of the hands that it touches. And Miles, to your point, that
Mhm.
there's these quote support roles, but they're not really a support role because without all of those pieces working well together, I mean, it's not gonna function, and those gifts aren't gonna be able to be put out into surgeons to basically help someone in need. And I think like that importance kind of ties into my next question. What's the one step in that entire life cycle of that creation of that gift that deserves more appreciation or more attention? Because I mean, you've kind of been through the entire process.
Yeah, Bravin, it's a great question because I was thinking about this the other day. The one probably role I haven't done is being a processor, someone who handles a graft much after processing, except for the implantation, right? For me, it's the people in distribution. I would say in my younger days, it was the recovery technician for sure. That's where I grew up, right? I recovered a lot of tissue, handled a lot of tissue on the front end. But when I think about what it takes to store tissue and distribute it, and those words maybe don't mean a whole lot, but when you think about tracing and tracking all of the grafts that come from a single donor, and then all of the graft that comes from 4 or 5 or 6,000 donors annually,
Right.
and you can pinpoint where that graft is at any given time, those are the people that I'm in awe of because they know where those grafts are. They know where those grafts are going. They know where in the process that graft is. And so those are the ones that I think deserve some props here. And maybe it's because I've not done the job and I don't know how to do it. Maybe it's really easy. Maybe they
No, the
make it
logistics of it
really
are
easy. I don't
wild.
know.
That's
That was
funny.
But
always
but
the
I
worst.
that's what I'm in awe.
That was always the worst that was the worst section that it did. Kind of throw myself under the bus when I took the AETB exam in 2016. The distribution and storage was the one that I did the absolute worst on. So
Yeah.
I could agree with you on that one. But
It's funny too. I love that team of folks that are interfacing directly with the surgeons because if they know enough about the miracle that it takes for those of us who are on the recovery and authorization side, if they know the miracle that it takes to even get that graft to processing and they're working with surgeons and they understand that they don't want to waste. And so I think the innovation that comes out of graft production in combination of what we have, because these aren't widgets we can build on a shelf, right? They require human donor, family, selflessness, and anatomy to be right, all of that. If they can start working through that, I think that there's so much potential there between what we have, what we want to make the use, to make the most of it, be good stewards of the graft, all of that. I think that's phenomenal and miraculous. I think the question that I have for you is in all of your roles and in all of your time, do you have a biggest lesson?
Yes. So here's a lesson that comes to mind, right? Is to never burn bridges. And that might be a simple lesson, but in very applicable ways, I can tell people whether they're young or older or seasoned like myself, don't burn bridges, particularly in this industry. I have heard a million times, if I've heard it once, that it's a small world. Yeah, it is a small world, but tissue banking is even smaller. And so here, the reason I say don't burn bridges is because you don't know where you're going to be in a year or 5 years or 10 years. You have no
Right.
idea. And you have no idea of how many people who might you might work with today that may leave, you may leave, and then 5 years from there, you're right back together again. Or 10 years, you're right back together again. And in some cases, you might even report to that person, or they may report to you, or whatever the circumstance is, don't burn bridges because you just don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
You talk about my having multiple roles in this industry or in this field, and I have. And so one of the things about me is I work for MTF Biologics. The thing is, I used to work for MTF Biologics.
Oh,
I started there in 2005 and I worked there until 2026. And lo and behold, 10 years later, I'm back at MTF Biologics. And I didn't burn bridges. I didn't do that on purpose. I just don't burn bridges. But I didn't know I was going to be back at MTF. And I'm working with many of the same people I worked with 10 years ago. And it's great.
I love that. It's a good lesson. I always say, we talk about like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I think in the tissue industry, it's probably 2 degrees,
Yeah,
I
one and
bet
a half
it's
to
2
two.
degrees of Jeff Thomas.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean,
That's
you
a
say
really
the
good
name
advice.
Jeff Thomas in to anyone that's in tissue banking, and they're going to know like Jeff Thomas and Jeff Wiggins, the two Jeffs that almost everyone and their mother in tissue banking knows. I mean, like, there's not any two better Jeffs. No offense to any other Jeff that I've met that's listening to this call, but or to this to this podcast episode. Jeff's my man, and I appreciate him always. But
I appreciate you saying that, Bradley, but I have to interject that there is another Jeff Thomas in tissue banking,
oh,
and that's my brother from another mother. So I hope he's hearing this because I just want to say one thing that I'm still the Jeff Thomas
dang straight.
reference.
That's hilarious.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, I think just kind of looking at time, we want to be super respectful. I think we're going to do a really quick lightning round. It's going to be two super quick questions for you. We did provide
Okay.
Jeff the questions for everything else beforehand, just so he could do a little bit of prep. But this one, we didn't give him any prep. So first thing that comes to mind. So what is one word to describe the work to produce a tissue graft?
I'm sorry, ask it one
No, you're
word
good.
to describe
What is one word to describe the work to produce a tissue graft?
honorable.
Mm.
I love it. And then the other one is what is the most underestimated role in the process? And you can't say distribution again.
No, that's awesome. So underestimated, I would say medical director because most people don't know what they do. But gosh, maybe the people that do the requesting, so a requester. Many people don't see them. They exist. They do a heck of a job and they do a really hard job.
Yeah.
So I would say the requester.
As a certified requester, thank you. We appreciate that.
I had no idea. I had no
No, of
idea.
course not. No, but I mean, like we said, it takes everybody, and there isn't anyone who's more important because without one piece of this puzzle, it doesn't happen. But that work is hard, and it can sometimes be hard to quantify as being done. I believe that there's a good no, there's an informed no from a family, but it's hard to measure that sometimes. So I
Into that.
appreciate that.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
I mean, I think like overall, I mean, I felt like this recording and like just kind of our dialogue was super beneficial. And I mean, I really like to think that you kind of highlighted that there's not just one step in the entire process that's more important than the other. Everyone is a team. I mean, there's a reason. I made a comment about this yesterday during a webinar. There's a reason tissue recovery is done in a team, and it's not just one person handling a full case completely by themselves. And I think that same concept applies to the life cycle, basically from the approach to the family to that final release and when it's implanted into a surgeon. So I think you hit that nail right on the head, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad. And I appreciate you saying that. I will note that the medical director has an important job and nobody
No
knows
shade to
what they
medical
do.
directors. We love them too.
And
In the spirit
I
of not
think
burning any bridges.
I think Jeff might have made that comment because there is a medical director kind of lurking in the shadows of this podcast episode that's making sure that Miles and I behave while we're having this conversation. So shout out to all of our medical directors that help all of us. But
That's
I
right.
think we're kind of wrapping up on time. Miles, is there any last thing, or Jeff, any last wisdom that you would like to bestow upon the listeners of this podcast episode?
Not for me, Brad, but I do appreciate you guys inviting me to this and hosting me today. I just appreciate the opportunity.
We're grateful. The things that we're really excited about really as we get this podcast up and running is we want this content to be complementary to our offerings. So I highly suggest, Bravin, you mentioned doing a webinar recently about the recovery process. And I've been in this 15 years and I still learned so much yesterday. I encourage you guys all to engage with the content that the AATB is putting out. And also, as these things spark your own ideas, please, we're looking for abstracts for the conference. The Congress in 2026. We have named it now From Conference to Congress. So we're all practicing the new nomenclature, and we're really looking forward to what's on the horizon for the association. So please don't hesitate, contact us, reach out, get connected, and we'll see you again soon.
Jeff, we appreciate you again, and stay tuned next time for the next episode of the Tissue Connection. Thank you, guys. See you guys.
Thanks so much.
Okay.